The sound of a Polaroid camera cuts through the silence. A sharp click, a mechanical whir, then a flat white square sliding out like a secret. Someone shakes it. The image blooms slowly in the humid Florida air. A woman's hand finds it resting beneath a car windshield wiper outside a convenience store. At first, it looks like any old photograph, until she really sees it. A young woman and a boy, both bound, both gagged, both staring directly at the camera, their eyes wide with a silent, bottomless terror. The woman gasps and drops it. The Polaroid lands face up on the hot pavement, staring back like a living thing. For investigators, the image would become both a clue and a curse, a window into something monstrous. But for one mother, hundreds of miles away in New Mexico, it would become something else entirely, a possibility. Because the girl in that photo, the one with the dark hair and the familiar mole, looked exactly like her missing daughter, Tara Calico. And so begins one of the most haunting mysteries in American true crime, a case that drifts between the ordinary and the unthinkable, between the warmth of a sunny morning bike ride and the cold eternity of not knowing. The Polaroid promised answers, but what it delivered was a riddle, one that has haunted every person who's ever dared to look too closely. This is the story of Tara Lee Calico, the girl who went for a bike ride and vanished into the bright light of a New Mexico morning.
It began not with a scream, but with silence. The kind of silence that hums in small towns when the heat settles in, when everyone has gone about their lives believing the world is still safe. Port St. Joe, Florida, a quiet coastal town in June of 1989. The air was thick with salt and humidity, the kind of heat that sticks to the back of your neck and slows everything down. A woman walked out of a convenience store, a soda in one hand, car keys jingling in the other. It was the kind of stop no one remembers, until something on her windshield caught her eye. A photograph. She peeled it from beneath the wiper, confused. A Polaroid. The edges curled slightly, the surface warm from the sun. It showed two people, a young woman and a boy, both bound with duct tape over their mouths, their eyes wide and hollow. Behind them, a rumpled white sheet, and what looked like the inside of a van. For a moment she thought, this can't be real. It had to be a prank. But the fear in their eyes, it was alive. It reached through the glossy paper and settled somewhere deep in her chest. She took it to the police. They studied it, passed it between hands, unsure what to make of it. The Polaroid had no timestamp, no caption, no origin, only horror. When it reached the FBI, agents noticed details that froze the blood. A paperback novel lay beside the young woman, My Sweet Audrina by V.C. Andrews, a story of confinement and control. The boy's wrist was wrapped tight in rope, his expression frozen mid-plea. The Bureau released the photo to the public. It spread like a contagion across newspapers and television screens. America looked into that photograph and saw something it couldn't unsee. Terror, frozen in time. Then the phone rang in a quiet home, more than 1,000 miles away, in a town called RIO Communities, New Mexico. A mother named Patty Dole answered. She had seen the same photograph on the evening news. And as soon as her eyes met the girl's, she stopped breathing. The dark hair, a small scar on her leg, the shape of the eyebrows, the faint mole by the nose. She whispered her daughter's name, Tara. Her husband tried to calm her, said maybe it was just a resemblance. But Patty knew. Every mother knows. There's a recognition that lives in the bones. She told the FBI, "That's my daughter. That's Tara Calico." But the world didn't yet know who Tara was, or how she'd come to vanish 9 months earlier on a quiet desert road. The agents listened, their pens scratching against paper as she described her daughter. 19, smart, stubborn, athletic, a girl who loved to run, to plan, to laugh. She was going to transfer to the University of New Mexico, maybe study psychology. On the morning of September 20th, 1988, Tara had left home for her daily bike ride along Highway 47, a straight stretch of road lined with desert scrub and barbed wire fences. She had told her mother she'd be back by noon. They joked about it even, Tara warning her mother to come get her if she wasn't back by 12. "You know I will," Patty had said, smiling. But noon came and went, then 1 o'clock, then 2 o'clock. When the clock reached 4, Patty's heart began to ache in that particular way that only mothers understand, the quiet intuition that something has gone terribly wrong. By sundown, searchers were combing the road. They found fragments, a piece of her Walkman, a broken cassette tape, the faint tracks of bicycle tires that led nowhere. But not Tara. Never Tara. For months, the town lived under a strange stillness. Posters faded on telephone poles. Rumors drifted through coffee shops. Some said she'd run away. Others whispered about a van seen following her that morning. A white pickup, maybe a dirty green truck. Then silence. Until this Polaroid. Until this photograph from nowhere. It was as though the desert itself had sent back a ghost, proof that Tara's story hadn't ended on that highway, but somewhere darker, deeper. Investigators compared the Polaroid to family photos of Tara. Forensic examiners analyzed bone structure, hairline, eye placement. The odds, they said, were strong enough that hope began to flicker again inside the Dole family home, a cruel, dangerous kind of hope. Patty stared at the photo for hours, memorizing every pixel of her daughter's face. She imagined what those moments must have been like. The sound of tape ripping, the smell of gasoline, the pounding in her daughter's chest. But what tortured her most was the question of time. If the Polaroid had been found in 1989, that meant Tara might still be alive. So Patty began to write letters to sheriffs, to television stations, to anyone who would listen. She became her daughter's voice, a woman possessed by the unbearable need to know. And somewhere in the empty spaces between those letters and phone calls, the story of Tara Calico grew into legend, whispered at gas stations, discussed on late-night radio, studied by strangers across the country who couldn't stop staring at that haunting photograph. It was no longer just a case. It was a question, a riddle, a wound that would never close. The girl in the photograph became a mirror for every missing daughter, every unanswered prayer. And yet, for all its terror, that Polaroid carried something else too. The faintest shimmer of possibility. Because where there's an image, there's life. And so the mystery deepened, not in the shadows, but in broad daylight, beneath the wide New Mexico sky. A girl goes for a bike ride. A mother waits by the window. And a photograph travels 1,000 miles to bring her face back from the void. It should have been an answer. Instead, it was only the beginning.
Morning broke over RIO Communities, New Mexico, with the kind of light that makes the desert look eternal. The horizon stretched like a painting, pale pinks giving way to gold, the air still cool before the sun began its daily conquest. Inside a modest home on Brugg Street, a small alarm clock clicked to life. The sound was sharp and familiar, beep, 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 followed by the faint creak of a bedroom door. Tara Calico, 19 years old, was already up. The sound of running water filled the house, the clink of a toothbrush against porcelain, the squeak of sneakers being tied tight, the hum of her mother's voice drifting in from the kitchen where the smell of coffee hung heavy and comforting. It was September 20th, 1988, a Tuesday, a day like any other, which is what makes it so unbearable to remember. Tara was a creature of routine. Every morning, she rode her pink Huffy bike 9 miles along Highway 47, a 2-lane stretch of asphalt bordered by mesquite, tumbleweed, and the far-off shimmer of heat. She always wore her headphones, a Sony Walkman that never left her side, blasting hits from Boston, Def Leppard, and her favorite band, The Police. That morning, she laughed as she teased her mother. Patty had grown uneasy about the ride. Too many cars, too few shoulders, too much open space. "Mom, if I'm not back by noon, come get me," Tara said, half joking, half serious. "I will," Patty replied. "You know I will." It was their little ritual, mother and daughter locked in that playful tug-of-war between independence and worry. Patty watched from the window as Tara rolled out of the driveway, her ponytail swinging, the front tire catching the light. She waved one last time before the girl disappeared down the long, straight road. The sound of the tires on gravel faded. The morning silence returned. For Tara, the ride was a meditation, a daily slice of freedom. The wind on her face, the steady rhythm of her legs pushing against the pedals, the sun rising higher with every mile. She must have felt unstoppable, the kind of confidence only 19 can give you when life still feels like something you can outrun. She pedaled past the same landmarks she always did, the row of mailboxes leaning like old men in the wind, the broken fence near the arroyo, the distant hum of trucks along the highway. Somewhere near mile marker 20, a few locals remembered seeing her, a flash of pink bike, dark hair, the glint of something metallic in her hand, maybe her Walkman. And then, nothing. She simply vanished into the day. Back home, Patty went about her routine, glancing at the clock every so often. 11, 11:30, noon. She expected to hear the sound of tires crunching on the gravel driveway, the door swinging open, her daughter announcing she'd beaten her best time. But the minutes stretched. Noon slipped into 1, then 2. The hum of the refrigerator grew louder in the quiet. At 12:30, Patty's chest tightened. She told herself not to panic. Tara might have had a flat tire, maybe stopped to chat with someone. Still, she grabbed her car keys. By 1 p.m., she was driving down Highway 47, scanning every curve, every shoulder. The road shimmered in the heat. Dust swirled behind her tires like ghosts. At mile marker 20, she saw something, a glint of plastic in the dirt. She pulled over, heart hammering. It was a cassette tape, one Tara had made. The plastic casing cracked, the magnetic tape spilling out like entrails. A few feet away, she found part of the Walkman, crushed. There was no bike, no footprints, no sound, only the distant buzz of cicadas and the low groan of wind through sagebrush. She called the police. Search teams fanned out that same afternoon, their voices echoing through the desert. They combed every arroyo, every ravine, every ditch. They found tire marks, possibly from a truck, but nothing more. The sheriff's department filed the report. Missing person, female, 19, brown hair, green eyes, last seen on a pink Huffy bicycle. Night fell over RIO Communities like a curtain. Porch lights flickered on across town. Patty sat awake by the window, staring into the dark, listening for the sound of bicycle tires returning home. But the desert gave nothing back. In the days that followed, the town came alive with speculation. Flyers went up on gas pumps and grocery doors. Local news anchors read her name with that solemn tone reserved for stories that always end badly. Her friends joined the search, retracing the route she'd ridden so many times. One of them said she felt Tara's presence near the bend where the road dips toward the river, like she was still there somehow, waiting to be found. The Calico home became a headquarters for hope and heartache. Volunteers came and went. Patty kept a notebook by the phone, recording every tip, every sighting, every cruel prank call that followed. The police looked into suspects, into strangers, into shadows, but the desert swallowed its secrets whole. And yet, even as the days turned into weeks, Patty refused to believe Tara was gone. She told reporters, "Someone took her. She wouldn't have just left. I'll find her." That certainty became her anchor and her torment, because certainty without closure is a kind of slow death. Every morning after, Patty still made coffee for two. She still looked out the window at the road. The sound of bicycle tires haunted her dreams, that rhythmic hum fading into the distance, never returning. In her mind, Tara was still out there somewhere, still pedaling through the bright New Mexico morning, still believing she'd be home by noon. And that is how the last day of Tara Calico's known life passed. In color, in motion, in sunlight. A girl on a pink bike heading toward a horizon that would swallow her whole. The desert can keep a secret better than any man. It doesn't shout. It doesn't confess. It simply swallows what it's given and waits. By late afternoon on September 20th, 1988, that stretch of Highway 47 had turned into something else. No longer just a road, but a question carved into the earth. What happened here? The search began as the sun was starting to drop, the air cooling from its midday blaze. Neighbors, deputies, volunteers, they all gathered near the shoulder where Tara's mother had found the shattered cassette tape and fragments of the Walkman. The sound of boots crunching gravel filled the air. Radios crackled. Someone shouted Tara's name into the open. But the desert only answered with wind. Dogs were brought in, sniffing along the road. They caught a scent, followed it for a few hundred yards, and then nothing. The trail went cold in an instant, like a light switched off. The deputies found tire marks pressed into the soft dirt at the roadside. 2 sets, maybe 3. They didn't match Tara's bicycle. They were heavier, truck or van tires, wide, deep. But with no clear signs of struggle, no witnesses, no body, the evidence told them nothing more than what they already knew. She had been there, and now she was gone. As night fell, searchlights swept the open fields. The desert glowed in artificial beams, pale, ghostly, endless. They searched through midnight, through exhaustion, through the disbelief that something so small, a girl, a bike, a moment, could vanish so completely in the bright light of day. When dawn came, Patty Calico was still there, still watching from the roadside, her eyes red, her hands trembling around a styrofoam cup of coffee she couldn't drink. A deputy tried to reassure her. She might have gone off the road, could have gotten hurt, wandered off. But Patty shook her head. Not Tara. She would have found a way back. But she didn't. By the second day, helicopters joined the search. Their blades thumped through the sky, beating against the silence. From above, the desert looked almost peaceful, a tan ocean of sand and rock. But to those on the ground, it was merciless. Every mile looked the same. Every ravine looked like a grave. Then came the first call, a possible sighting. Someone thought they'd seen a white pickup following a girl on a pink bike that morning. Another claimed it was a dirty green truck, another a camper van. The stories shifted like mirages. None of them led anywhere. The investigation ballooned. FBI agents, state police, local deputies, all combing through rumors, all chasing ghosts. Still, no bike, no clothing, no blood. It was as if the earth had opened up and taken her. Back home, Patty and her husband printed flyers. Tara's smile beamed from every lamppost, every gas station window in Valencia County. The caption was simple. Missing, Tara Lee Calico, age 19. Last seen riding her pink bicycle along Highway 47. Please help bring her home. At night, Patty couldn't sleep. Every sound outside, the crunch of gravel, the rumble of a truck passing by, jolted her awake. She would look out the window hoping, praying, but it was always just the wind, moving through the trees like whispers. Weeks passed, then months, and with them came theories, each more unbearable than the last. Some said she'd run away, that maybe she'd grown tired of the small-town rhythm, the predictability. But Patty laughed bitterly at that idea. She said, Tara had plans. She was going to transfer to the university, buy her own car. She didn't run away from life. She ran towards it. Others whispered darker things, that she'd been hit by a vehicle, perhaps accidentally, and someone had panicked. That maybe the driver wasn't just anyone, but someone connected, the kind of person the sheriff's office wouldn't dare to accuse. Those whispers grew louder with time. Theories about sons of local law enforcement, about a cover-up, about bodies buried where the desert met the hills. But without proof, the case remained suspended, too cold to chase, too cruel to close. By December, the search was officially scaled back, but Patty never stopped. She drove that same road every day, scanning the edges for something, anything. Sometimes she thought she saw shapes in the sand, flashes of pink. Sometimes she'd stop, run her hands through the dirt, and whisper her daughter's name to the wind. The world, of course, moved on. News cycles shifted. Other stories took the spotlight. But in RIO Communities, time split in two, before Tara vanished and after. Evenings were the worst. The sound of the house settling felt like footsteps. The silence at dinner stretched like miles. Every night before bed, Patty would stand by the window, the same window she'd watched Tara ride away from, and whisper, "Good night, baby. I'll find you." She began to dream of the road, always the same vision, Tara pedaling under the burning sun, her figure growing smaller and smaller until she disappeared completely. There's something particularly cruel about the way hope behaves in cases like this. It doesn't die quickly. It decays slowly, piece by piece, until it becomes indistinguishable from pain. By spring of 1989, all that remained of the search were cardboard boxes full of reports, maps, and photographs. The investigators had no answers, only evidence of absence. One detective would later say, "It's like she was erased, not kidnapped, not killed, just erased." And yet for Patty, that absence was its own kind of proof. Because where there's no body, no finality, there's still room, however small, for belief. Belief that maybe Tara was out there somewhere alive. Belief that maybe she'd been taken but not lost. Belief that maybe the next phone call would be the one. But instead of a call, what came nearly a year later was a photograph. A single image that would reignite every fear, every fury, every sleepless night. A photograph that would make the world ask, did the desert really keep its secret? Or had it been captured, printed, and mailed from hell itself?
The desert road stretched endlessly, a ribbon of faded asphalt cutting through a horizon of sun and silence. The morning heat shimmered. The air buzzed faintly with cicadas. Somewhere, far off, a single hawk carved a lazy circle above the mesas. And Tara Calico was gone. No one saw it happen. No scream was heard, no struggle reported. Just a vanishing, sudden, soundless, surgical. But in the hours before she vanished, everything was still beautifully, heartbreakingly normal. Patty Dole had watched her daughter ride off that morning, pink bike gleaming, headphones on, confidence in every pedal. She remembered the flash of sunlight on the silver spokes as Tara disappeared down the road toward Highway 47, the same way she always did. Tara had said she'd be back by noon. They'd planned to go out later that day, maybe run some errands, maybe just talk. She didn't know those would be the last words she'd ever hear her daughter say. By late morning, the air had grown thick and heavy, as if holding its breath. On that lonely stretch of road, the one Tara had ridden nearly every day, the world felt empty, too empty. And then, silence. Not just quiet, but an absence of sound so complete it pressed against the skin. The kind of silence that follows a scream no one else hears. The only clues that remained were small, scattered fragments of a life interrupted. A cassette tape, cracked, dirt-streaked, found in the dust by the roadside. A shattered piece of her Sony Walkman. Later, a section of tire tracks that didn't belong to her bike. Each one a whisper in the wind, a clue to a story that refused to tell itself. No witnesses, no suspects, no explanation. It was as if the New Mexico desert had simply opened its mouth and swallowed her whole. In the first hours, no one panicked. Not yet. Patty assumed maybe her daughter had gone a little farther than usual. Maybe she'd stopped to help someone. Maybe her bike had a flat. But by early afternoon, the unease had settled in, sharp and persistent, like a thorn under the skin. Patty drove the route herself, calling her daughter's name out the open car window. The wind carried her voice, but there was no answer. Only the rhythmic hum of tires on hot pavement, the distant rustle of dry grass, the echo of absence. By late day, panic bloomed fully. She called the police. She called friends. Neighbors joined the search, spreading out along the long, lonely stretch of Highway 47. They combed the fields and arroyos, shouting Tara's name into the vast silence of the desert. Each call returned only the echo of their own fear. As night fell, the desert turned cold. The sun slipped beneath the horizon, painting the sky in bruised purples and deep reds. Flashlights pierced the darkness, sweeping over sagebrush and gravel. Nothing. The only thing they found was the Walkman, cracked open as if it had been thrown or crushed. Next to it, the tape that had spilled out, a compilation of her favorite songs, the ones she'd always played on her morning rides. Someone picked it up, turned it over in their hand, and whispered, "She must have dropped it when she fell." But there were no signs of a fall, no skid marks from her bike, no sign of a struggle, no bicycle. Just that tape lying in the dust like a message from another world. The next morning, the search expanded. Dozens of volunteers joined the effort, walking shoulder to shoulder through brush and sand, hoping to find something, anything. Helicopters swept overhead. Patrol cars lined the roads. The sheriff's deputies marked the map in red circles where possible clues had turned up. But every lead bled into another dead end. The road gave up nothing. One man remembered seeing a white pickup truck trailing behind a cyclist around the same time Tara had gone missing. Another claimed he'd seen a suspicious van parked along the highway shoulder earlier that morning. But no license plate, no name, no confirmation, just ghosts in memory. Rumors began to spread, as they always do when answers vanish into air. Some said it was a hit and run. Some whispered about an abduction. Some said maybe she'd run away. But anyone who knew Tara dismissed that instantly. She had plans, friends, a future she was already building. She wasn't the kind of girl who disappeared. But she did. Patty refused to sleep that night. She sat by the phone, listening to the static hum of the receiver between calls. Every sound outside made her heart jolt. The bark of a dog, the crunch of tires on gravel, the wind brushing against the side of the house. At one point, she thought she heard a faint knock at the door. She ran to it, flung it open, and found nothing but darkness. Days turned to weeks. The search teams grew smaller. The helicopters stopped coming. The story slipped from the front page of the local paper. But Patty never stopped. Every day she drove that same road, the same road her daughter had taken. She looked out at the endless desert and whispered her name into the wind. Tara. Sometimes she swore she could almost hear a faint reply, just the echo of her own voice coming back to her, carried on the hot air. There's a certain cruelty in how quickly life moves on when someone vanishes. The world doesn't stop. The mail still arrives. The sun still rises. The phone still rings. But for Patty Dole, time fractured that day. One half of her lived in the present. The other was trapped on that road, cycling endlessly into the distance beside her daughter. Tara's bicycle was never found. No one ever heard her scream. It was as if the desert itself had taken her in and refused to give her back. But yet, there was something, some sliver of knowing that remained. Because the desert doesn't erase everything. It just hides what it's not yet ready to reveal. Patty would keep driving that same stretch of road for months, years even, hoping that one day the silence would finally speak. But it never did. Not yet. The day after Tara vanished, the air over RIO Communities felt different. It wasn't just quiet, it was hollow, as if the desert itself had lost its heartbeat. The road she rode every morning was now lined with people, deputies, volunteers, neighbors, their voices carried on the dry wind. Search dogs strained at their leashes. The hum of engines broke the stillness as patrol cars crawled along the shoulder. They were looking for anything. A scrap of fabric, a tire track, a sign that the earth might give her back. But the road gave nothing. Only the same long ribbon of asphalt stretching into nowhere. The same horizon that had swallowed her whole. Inside the Dole home, time had stopped. The smell of coffee lingered in the kitchen. Tara's breakfast plate still sat on the counter. Crumbs hardened into silence. Patty sat by the window, watching the road, the phone clutched in her hand like a lifeline. Every sound made her flinch. The ring of the phone, the slam of a car door outside, even the whisper of wind through the curtains. She answered every call with the same breathless hope, the same trembling question. Did you find her? Each time, the answer was no. The word no became a sound that lived in her bones. Days turned into weeks. The search widened. Fields, arroyos, riverbanks. The sheriff's office released flyers with Tara's picture. 19 years old, green eyes, strawberry blonde hair. Last seen riding her pink bike along Highway 47 at 9:30 a.m. The news stations ran her story, showing her senior photo, smiling, confident, alive. The same picture repeated so often, it began to feel like a ghost haunting the evening broadcasts. Strangers called with tips. A girl who looked like her at a truck stop, a sighting near the Arizona border, a rumor from Texas. Each call pulled Patty's heart up toward hope and then dropped it again into the pit of dread. Every lead dissolved into dust. Weeks became months. The flyers yellowed under the desert sun. The phone stopped ringing as often. Reporters moved on to other stories, newer, louder tragedies. But Patty didn't move on. She couldn't. She began riding Tara's route herself every day, following the same trail, the same bends in the road, the same telephone poles flickering past the car window. Sometimes she'd stop, get out, and just stand in the heat, staring into the brush as if she could will her daughter to reappear. She said she could feel her presence there, a pressure in the air, a heartbeat in the silence. At night, she'd dream of headlights on a dusty road, a van slowing beside a girl on a bike. She'd wake gasping, the image vanishing as quickly as it came. It wasn't proof, just pain, disguised as possibility. There's a strange kind of cruelty in hope. It demands faith when the evidence says give up. It feeds you just enough to survive the ache. For Patty, hope was the only thing that made the silence bearable. She kept Tara's room exactly as she'd left it. The posters on the wall, the books on the nightstand, the bicycle gloves folded neatly in the drawer. Every morning she opened the window to let in the light, and every night she whispered, "Good night," into the darkness. The sound of the empty house became its own language. The creak of the floorboards, the click of the light switch, the slow hum of the refrigerator. Each sound said what words couldn't. She's gone, but she's still here. By the first winter after Tara's disappearance, the case had grown cold. The sheriff's office had no suspects, no witnesses, and no body. Rumors spread through town like dry weeds catching flame. Stories of young men in a white pickup, of local connections quietly buried. But no one could prove anything. The police held press conferences saying they were still investigating. Patty attended every one, her expression carved from equal parts grief and defiance. She learned to read the faces of the officers, the ones who cared, the ones who didn't, the ones who already thought Tara was dead. But Patty refused to let the world bury her daughter twice, once in the desert and once in memory. So she did what the system wouldn't. She became the investigation. She gathered her own notes, drew her own maps, followed her own leads. She called detectives from other states. She mailed letters to media outlets, begging them to keep Tara's story alive. And slowly, piece by piece, she began to see the outline of something darker. Whispers of a cover-up. Hints that the wrong people might have been involved. People who couldn't afford to be caught. But soak was smoke, and smoke in the desert always disappears before you can touch it. The first anniversary of Tara's disappearance arrived quietly. No headlines, no new clues. Just a family gathering in a small circle under the New Mexico sky, candles flickering in the wind. Patty spoke softly, her voice trembling. "She's still out there, and I'm still waiting." The sound of the wind answered, dry, endless, eternal. As night fell, the stars came out over the desert, cold, unblinking witnesses to everything that had been taken and everything that remained unseen. Tara's name carried on the air like a prayer, not loud, but lasting, not desperate, but devoted. The desert didn't answer, but it didn't forget either. In the silence that followed, a mother's hope endured, not because she was certain her daughter was alive, but because she couldn't survive believing she wasn't. And so every morning, Patty looked out toward that long, empty road, the one that swallowed her child whole, and whispered, "Today might be the day." And though the road stayed silent and the wind offered no reply, she kept listening. Because sometimes, the only way to fight the silence is to refuse to stop listening.
It was June of 1989, almost a year since Tara had vanished. The desert heat had returned, burning away what little hope still clung to the edges of RIO communities. Patty still woke every morning to the same sound, silence. Still drove the same road, still whispered the same prayer. But what came next didn't come from New Mexico. It came from a parking lot, more than 1,200 miles away. A sun-bleached strip of asphalt outside a convenience store in Port St. Joe, Florida. A woman stepped out of a grocery store that morning, a paper bag in her hand and the salt-heavy breeze of the Gulf brushing her hair. She noticed something strange on the ground, a small Polaroid photograph lying face down near the driver's door of her car. She almost ignored it. Just a piece of trash, she thought. But something, maybe curiosity, maybe instinct, made her pick it up. The moment she turned it over, her breath caught in her throat. The sound that escaped her was somewhere between a gasp and a prayer. In her hand was a photograph, the kind that develops itself, its glossy edges still intact. In it were two people, a young woman and a boy, both bound, both gagged with black tape, their eyes wide, pleading, not at the camera, but beyond it, as if begging whoever held it to stop. Behind them was the inside of a van, the kind used for hauling, with patterned upholstery. In the girl's lap was a paperback book, My Sweet Audrina, by V.C. Andrews. And though the photograph said nothing, it screamed. The woman ran to the nearest phone booth and called the police. Within hours, the small Florida town was buzzing, not with gossip, but with dread. The image made its way to the sheriff's department, then to the FBI, then to television. And when it appeared on the evening news, that grainy, color-drained photo held up for the nation to see, the world seemed to stop. In New Mexico, Patty Dole was watching. When the photo flashed across the screen, her body froze. Her hand covered her mouth, and her heart, already cracked from a year of grief, began to pound with something she hadn't felt in months: recognition. The girl in the Polaroid had the same hair, the same jawline, the same tiny scar on her leg. She looked terrified, but alive. Patty leaned forward, trembling, whispering her daughter's name. Tara. The FBI contacted the Doles. Agents flew out carrying copies of the Polaroid, ready to analyze every possible detail. Patty and her husband examined it under the harsh light of the living room lamp. She pointed out the mole on the calf, identical to Tara's. The book in her lap, the same one Tara had been reading that week. Even the boy beside her looked familiar in a tragic way. He resembled another missing child, Michael Henley, who had disappeared that same spring in New Mexico while on a camping trip less than 100 miles from where Tara was last seen. Two missing children, one horrifying photograph. It was impossible. And yet, there it was. The authorities tried to remain cautious. The Polaroid was real, no editing, no trick of light. But who the captives were and where the photo was taken remained a mystery. They traced the brand of the film stock. It was made in May of 1989, meaning the photo couldn't have been taken before then. That meant Tara might have been alive 9 months after she vanished. The thought both saved and shattered Patty. If it was Tara, she was alive somewhere, terrified, restrained, and waiting for help. If it wasn't, then someone somewhere had gone to unspeakable lengths to hurt a mother already drowning in grief. For weeks, the image dominated headlines. It ran on America's Most Wanted, Unsolved Mysteries, and in every newspaper that could fit it above the fold. People claimed to recognize the van, the wallpaper, even the beach towel in the background. But every lead led to nowhere: false tips, wrong turns, or silence. The woman who found the Polaroid said she'd seen a white Toyota cargo van nearby, driven by a mustachioed man in his 30s. But when police arrived, he and the van were gone. Gone, like Tara. Back in New Mexico, the photo became an obsession. Patty carried it everywhere, in her purse, in her car, sometimes in her hands as she spoke to reporters. She studied it every inch, desperate to hear what the image couldn't say. She believed with all her heart it was Tara. Others weren't so sure. Some law enforcement officials said the girl didn't look quite right, that her eyebrows were different, her face longer. The FBI's analysis was inconclusive. The photo was real, but not reliable. And so once again, hope split into two cruel halves, one that whispered, "She's alive," and one that hissed, "You'll never know." The boy in the picture added to the confusion. At first, many thought it was Michael Henley. His parents believed it too. But in June of that same year, searchers discovered Michael's remains in the Zuni Mountains, less than 10 miles from where he'd gone missing. He died of exposure. That single discovery eliminated one mystery and deepened another. If the boy wasn't Michael, then who was he? And if the girl wasn't Tara, why did she look so much like her? The photo haunted everyone who saw it, but no one more than Patty. It hung in her home like an icon of pain, a relic of the moment when her world tilted between life and death, certainty and doubt. She said she could see emotion in the girl's eyes, something raw, pleading, defiant. "She's telling me," she whispered to a reporter once, "that she's still here, that she's waiting for me to find her." And so a year after her daughter vanished, her grief was replaced not by closure, but by an even sharper agony, the kind that comes when the past refuses to stay buried and the present refuses to give you peace. Because sometimes the most terrifying sound is the click of a camera shutter. It can capture life or imprison it. And in that one Polaroid, snapped in some unknown van, somewhere between two broken families and a nation transfixed by horror, a nightmare became a photograph that wouldn't fade, wouldn't age, wouldn't die, just like the mystery it carried. The Polaroid had given the world a face, but not a truth. And truth, in the story of Tara Calico, became a shifting desert mirage. Every time you thought you could see it clearly, it disappeared. For years, the photograph lived in the corners of America's imagination, passed from one investigator to another, from one living room to another, until it became something more than evidence. It became myth. But for Patty Dole, there was nothing mythical about it. To her, it was her daughter's voice trapped in glossy film, a silent cry that no one could answer. Theories began to spread like wildfire across the plains of New Mexico. Some whispered of strangers, passing truckers, drifters, shadows that move quickly and vanish faster. But others pointed closer to home. In the early 2000s, long after the case had gone cold, a rumor began to take form. A rumor that would drag the case into the realm of conspiracy and small-town secrecy. According to whispers, and later to a few brave statements, two young men from a prominent family had been seen following Tara that morning in a pickup truck. They were sons of a local law enforcement official, men protected by power, their mistakes shielded by influence. The theory went like this: a reckless encounter on the road turned violent. Tara, independent and outspoken, fought back. Something went wrong. Panic set in. A cover-up began. A town buried the truth beneath its dusty roads and unspoken loyalties. For years, that theory lingered in the dark, unprovable, unshakable. Then, in 2013, the former sheriff of Valencia County, Lawrence Romero Sr., passed away. Not long after, whispers turned into something more solid. Claims from those who knew him that he had hinted in his final years about knowing what really happened to Tara Calico, that her death wasn't random, that her body had been hidden and protected by people in uniform. But even as the rumors grew, so did the distance between truth and proof. The names were never confirmed, the evidence never surfaced. The desert, it seemed, was determined to keep its secrets. For Patty, though, the theories were more than gossip. They were lifelines, threads of maybe that she followed wherever they led. She spent years writing letters, calling law enforcement, pushing for the case to be reopened. She studied aerial maps, hired private investigators, even tried hypnosis to remember every detail of Tara's last morning. When her husband suggested letting go, she told him softly, "I can't. She's still out there." Every year on September 20th, she placed a new poster near Highway 47, the same road Tara had ridden down. Each poster was brighter than the last, as if refusing to let time bleach her daughter's memory away. Some nights she would dream of the Polaroid, but in her dream, the tape was gone. Tara was speaking, and every time she woke up, she tried to remember what her daughter had said, but she never could. And still, there were other theories. Some insisted the Polaroid was a cruel hoax. An FBI photo expert suggested the resemblance was coincidental, that the girl wasn't Tara at all. Others pointed out inconsistencies, differences in teeth, in the shape of her face, in the way her legs bent. And there was that haunting question: who took the photo, and why leave it behind where it could be found? If it was meant as proof, why abandon it? If it was a threat, who was it for? The possibility that it was staged, a deliberate act of cruelty, sent waves of nausea through those closest to the case. Because what kind of person would use the face of a missing girl to twist a knife in a mother's heart? Then there was the boy. He was never identified. If the girl wasn't Tara and the boy wasn't Michael Henley, then who were they? The Polaroid remained a window without a view. You could look through it all you wanted, but the other side never came into focus. More photos surfaced over the years, other images of bound women and children that people thought might be connected, but they were never verified. Each one felt like a cruel echo of the first, ghosts haunting the edges of reality, daring someone to make sense of them. In 2008, Patty Dole passed away, still believing Tara was alive somewhere. Her home, once filled with laughter and music, had become a shrine to the missing. Walls lined with photographs, newspaper clippings, maps, and that one Polaroid, the ghost that refused to let her rest. Her husband later said that Patty spent her final days talking to her daughter as though she were in the room. She told her everything, he said quietly, about the Polaroid, about the theories, about how much she missed her. I think she believed Tara could hear her. After Patty's death, Tara's siblings carried on the search. In 2013, law enforcement publicly acknowledged that they were investigating new leads, including the theory of local involvement. In 2021, the FBI confirmed that the case remained active, one of the longest-running missing persons investigations in New Mexico history. But the desert hasn't given up its secret, not yet. The Tara Calico case lives in a strange space between faith and evidence, a place where grief becomes its own kind of detective, and love refuses to surrender to logic. Maybe Tara was taken by strangers. Maybe she died that same day on Highway 47. Maybe she lived longer, long enough for someone to capture her suffering in a photograph. Every possibility is a wound that never closes. The sound of that Polaroid camera, that click, that whir, still echoes through the case like a phantom heartbeat. It reminds us that evidence doesn't always tell the truth. Sometimes it only mirrors our fears. And in the story of Tara Calico, every reflection, every theory, every rumor, every desperate mother's prayer only leads to the same haunting silence. A silence that says, "You don't know. You may never know." There's a kind of silence only the desert knows. A silence that hums, that waits. In the RIO communities of New Mexico, that silence still carries the name Tara Lee Calico. It's been more than 30 years since she disappeared on that bright September morning, and yet her shadow stretches across generations. The roads she rode are cracked now, the telephone poles older, the houses changed. But ask anyone who's lived there long enough, and they'll tell you. The story of the girl on the bike never really left. Because Tara's case isn't just about loss. It's about pursuit of truth, of closure, of justice that never seems to arrive. It's about a mother's refusal to let the world move on when her daughter was still out there, somewhere, waiting to be found. In the years since, Tara's story has rippled far beyond her small New Mexico town. It's become part of the larger tapestry of American cold cases, haunting reminders that not all stories find their endings. Her name is spoken alongside others like Mara Murray, Amy Mihaljevic, and Jennifer Kessie, young women swallowed by circumstance, memory, and mystery. But Tara's case carries something distinct. That photograph, the Polaroid, turned her disappearance into something mythic, a physical object of fear and hope, a single frozen moment that continues to mock explanation. Whether it was her in that picture or not, it changed how we see missing person cases. It made people realize that proof doesn't always bring peace. Even now, the FBI keeps her case open. Digital forensics, aging suspects, new witness interviews, all chasing what's left of a trail gone cold long ago. And yet there's beauty in that persistence. Because every reopened file, every whispered theory, every retelling keeps Tara alive in the only way the lost can live, through remembrance. Her story reminds us that time does not erase what matters, that even in the forgotten corners of the American landscape, truth can still flicker. Somewhere out there, someone knows exactly what happened on September 20th, 1988. Maybe they've carried it like a stone in their chest. Maybe they've buried it deep enough to believe it's gone. But stories like this one have a way of surfacing, slowly, quietly, inevitably. Because the desert still speaks, and some names echo forever. Tara Lee Calico, born February 28, 1969, missing since September 20th, 1988. If you know something, even the smallest detail, contact the FBI or the Valencia County Sheriff's Office. Her story isn't over. You might be the one to finish it. If this story moved you, don't let it fade into the silence. Tara Lee Calico was only 19 when she vanished, and somewhere out there, the truth still exists. If you believe her story deserves justice, share this video. Leave a comment with your thoughts, your theories, or simply her name. Every voice keeps her memory alive. Subscribe to Cold Case 48 for more untold stories like this, stories that still whisper from the edges of America. Because sometimes, the smallest detail, the one buried in someone's memory, can bring the missing home. Tara Calico's case is still open, and maybe one day, it won't be. There's a kind of silence only the desert knows. A silence that hums, that waits. In the RIO communities of New Mexico, that silence still carries the name Tara Lee Calico. It's been more than 30 years since she disappeared on that bright September morning, and yet her shadow stretches across generations. The roads she rode are cracked now. The telephone poles older, the houses changed. But ask anyone who's lived there long enough, and they'll tell you. the story of the girl on the bike, never really left. Because Tara's case isn't just about loss. It's about pursuit of truth, of closure, of justice that never seems to arrive. It's about a mother's refusal to let the world move on when her daughter was still out there, somewhere, waiting to be found. In the years since, Tara's story has rippled far beyond her small New Mexico town. It's become part of the larger tapestry of American cold cases, haunting reminders that not all stories find their endings. Her name is spoken alongside others like Mara Murray, Amy Mihaljevic, and Jennifer Kesse, young women swallowed by circumstance, memory, and mystery. But Tara's case carries something distinct. That photograph, the Polaroid, turned her disappearance into something mythic, a physical object of fear and hope, a single frozen moment that continues to mock explanation. Whether it was her in that picture or not, it changed how we see missing person cases. It made people realize that proof doesn't always bring peace. Even now, the FBI keeps her case open. Digital forensics, aging suspects, new witness interviews, all chasing what's left of a trail gone cold long ago. And yet there's beauty in that persistence, because every reopened file, every whispered theory, every retelling keeps Tara alive in the only way the lost can live, through remembrance. Her story reminds us that time does not erase what matters, that even in the forgotten corners of the American landscape, truth can still flicker. Somewhere out there, someone knows exactly what happened on September 20th, 1988. Maybe they've carried it like a stone in their chest. Maybe they've buried it deep enough to believe it's gone. But stories like this one have a way of surfacing, slowly, quietly, inevitably. Because the desert still speaks, and some names echo forever. Tara Lee Calico, born February 28, 1969, missing since September 20th, 1988. If you know something, even the smallest detail, contact the FBI or the Valencia County Sheriff's Office. Her story isn't over. You might be the one to finish it. If this story moved you, don't let it fade into the silence. Tara Lee Calico was only 19 when she vanished, and somewhere out there, the truth still exists. If you believe her story deserves justice, share this video. Leave a comment with your thoughts, your theories, or simply her name. Every voice keeps her memory alive. Subscribe to Cold Case 48 for more untold stories like this, stories that still whisper from the edges of America. Because sometimes, the smallest detail, the one buried in someone's memory, can bring the missing home. Tara Calico's case is still open, and maybe one day, it won't be.